Tim, let's just start out. Let's establish your name. If you say it and then spell it for us, that helps with the transcription.
Sure. I'm Tim Mazur, which is Timmazur.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Now tell us a little bit about how you got started in the field of ethics and compliance, or whatever you call it.
As a teenager, I was interested in business, and I got a full-time job working at a bank while I was going to college in San Diego. And it was actually a savings and loan. And while I worked there, the savings and loan crisis occurred. And I saw this extraordinary change both in my local management and the savings and loans management at the headquarters. And I was struck by the unethical behavior that began at a moment in time when the savings and loan regulators had been removed. And so it was just at a moment when I was asking what I wanted to be when I grew up. I knew it had to do with business. And I came to realize that this took me by such surprise that I wanted to earn an MBA in business ethics because, again, I was already in college at this point, already had my major. And so I ended up writing letters to business schools asking if anyone would give me an MBA in business ethics. There weren't any then. The George Washington University was thrilled and allowed me to kind of create my own curriculum beyond the core, and ended up delivering the commencement address talking all about business ethics. And the Monday after graduation, I was working at the Ethics Resource Center.
So you identified this as a career early on and found your way into the profession.
Absolutely.
What happened after ERC?
My wife suffered from asthma from the swampiness of the Washington, D.C. area. So she 2 times to the emergency room. So we had to move away. Kirk Hansen welcomed me to California and gave me a job working in business ethics for a consulting firm. And so that began, I don't know, about 10 years or so working in ethics and compliance, or in business ethics as a consultant. So we first went to Marin County, north of San Francisco, and then went to Santa Clara University, south down near San Jose. And from there it went to Columbus, Ohio. And so there's been about 14 cities over the past 30-some years.
And Columbus you worked with?
With David Smith, and Columbus is home to the largest infant formula manufacturer in the United States, and the infant formula controversy had led to the creation of a nonprofit business ethics center there in Columbus, Ohio. And at a moment in time when the field of ethics consulting was beginning to grow, and I already had some experience, and so they brought me in to strengthen that, which I did for 4 years or so until the big four got into it, and they kind of did a number on the market for the small nonprofits. When the Price Waterhouse and the Arthur Andersons and the KPMGs got into the game.
So your next move was?
The next move from Columbus was to Chicago. KPMG hired me in there, and then from there to become an ethics officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Denver, Colorado. And then from there, an ethics officer at Countrywide Home Loans out of Dallas, Texas. And then the opportunity to come to Boston to have a leadership role at the ECOA, Ethics and Compliance Officer Association. And a 2-year gig as a distinguished professor of business ethics in Wyoming after 8 years at the ECOA. And then back to join the family because I commuted to Wyoming from Boston, which was exciting. 88 boarding passes 1 year. And then took a role as an ethics officer for Pratt & Whitney, and which is a role I had until 2 months ago. So
And now?
Now looking for what's next. They're merging. United Technologies is merging with Raytheon, so there are people who are being laid off, and it's one of those last in first out sort of things.
So, Tim, you've done quite a lot in quite a lot of places, and I saw your face when we talked about ethics, compliance, business ethics. You must have a feeling about what term is best or what's preferable. What term best describes the role that ethics and compliance officers should have?
Ethics and compliance.
You like ethics
so
and compliance?
I was against when the Ethics Officer Association changed its name. Who was the chair back then? I'm trying to remember. But eventually I came to appreciate the thought that went into it. And I'm actually quite infamous for being a very strong proponent of ethics and compliance as opposed to compliance and ethics, or just compliance.
Tell us why.
Oh, we already are fighting a tremendous uphill battle in the challenge of getting both the business people and the legal folks to respect, who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. And so it's so simple, just the psychology behind ethics and compliance, having the word ethics first. There's a few folks out there who are willing to buy into it just for the spin PR of it. But it's so great when you actually interact with a business person who ends up learning how truly important business can't actually do what it is designed to do without ethics being a part of it. And when they understand that, it's so for the rest of their lives, they'll consider it ethics and compliance instead of compliance and ethics.
Is that battle won, or is that an ongoing challenge?
Oh, ongoing, tremendously so. The power of the legal profession in the field is very strong. There are quite a few very powerful entities who want to make it that no one other than licensed legal professionals should be allowed to sit in these roles. And so those who fight and support the concept of ethics and compliance, it's just another tool in the tool belt as we try to help them understand that business ethics is something distinct from just legal compliance.
By the way, we might add too, if you could say that you are the treasurer of the Society for Business Ethics.
Yeah, yes, I am. So the concept of ethics folks working in organizations, ethics and compliance, but I would never want to change the name of the field of business ethics. So I'm honored to be an ex officio member of the board of directors of the Society for Business Ethics, and have been in the role of treasurer, I don't know, about 2.5 years, I think. And I think only one or two other individuals over the decades who aren't academicians who have been able to have this. So I feel great that I've been welcomed by the academic community to have this role.
And we are blessed to have someone that actually knows what he's doing.
Tim, can I ask you a question? Do ethics officers and compliance officers, or same thing, do they face pressure within the organization? Have you found that in your experience or your colleagues' experiences?
Absolutely, hugely, yeah, without a doubt. I've been shocked at the number of instances, not only for me personally, but when I was a leader of the ECOA, realizing the number of members who came to realize that they were hired to just make it look like the company had a great attitude toward ethics and really let it change the way things are done. But what they wanted is for them to accomplish that look without getting in the way of the decisions that would lead to the highest profit. So there are moments in time when doing the right thing will lead to something other than the highest amount of profit. And obviously there have been some lucky members of the field who have worked for organizations that have absolutely changed and have treated them with the respect that they deserve. But without a doubt, I know more stories between myself and others that I know where they have felt pressure to, well, we need to compromise on that. And, it's cute when you say that things are going well and there's several options available to us and you can help us realize that this one option might be better than that one. But please don't think that we're actually going to intentionally make less money than we could because of integrating ethics into our decision making.
What are the typical conflicts of interest? What are the areas of conflicts of interest there?
Oh, I guess, certainly issues of quality. When you're dealing with business people who've been trained that everything is about short-term decision making, they've made a commitment to their boss and their boss's boss that this will be accomplished by this date. We have to do this for the numbers this quarter. Inherent to any business person who cares about ethics is the reality of the long term. When the long term plays into the decision making, that can change. And so one of the conflicts is the short term versus the long term.
And do they have any protection at all?
In rare instances, they might have an employment contract. So certainly outside the United States, there are more instances of ethics officers having employment contracts, but most in the United States, nope, it's employment at will. And so if you end up making decisions or sending the signal to upper management that you care about something other than the preservation of upper management, then you are considered someone who isn't fully, a member of our team.
You talked about some of your own experiences in that space. Are you willing to share some of those stories with us?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there have been, I've had the honor of being, an ethics officer at 3 separate Fortune 500 companies. And, among them, there have been instances when, I was, I took in a very important case, and the case alleged misconduct against an executive. We had an entire published code about anonymity and how we would guarantee anonymity to the extent that we were never asked by a judge, to reveal. And so this executive demanded to know the source of a whistleblower. I had that information in my secure database. And so there was an instance when, that the power of that executive succeeded in getting IT to crack into my secure database so that executive could figure out who the whistleblower was, so that executive could punish and harm the whistleblower. So, that's a sort of experience where you instantly won't stay at that organization anymore because you've come to realize that, even when there was evidence of what happened, when upper management ends up supporting the person who does that instead of supporting the person that they've asked to sort of lead their ethics and compliance program, then that's that.
That's a difficult situation to live through. It suggests that there are some qualities for ethics and compliance officers that are pretty important, like backbone and willingness to walk away. What would you describe as the key qualities to be a successful ethics and compliance officer?
I would say it's integrity. The reality that if you make statements about what it means, about what you're going to do your job well and responsibly, that you actually stick with that even when the pressures get serious. I think sales, because you are selling the concept of the value of ethics in business and the fact that it's not an optional nice thing, but thankfully from reading Pat Haynes' books and papers and others like she over the years, realizing that from the moment business was designed, ethics was meant to be a part of it. It is at its best and even close to being at its best when ethics is a part of it. And so it's a matter of selling these business people who have never learned that, or they weren't paying attention when someone was trying to help them learn it, that's the way business was supposed to be, which is why, I've had such a passion for academia. So I don't have a doctorate, don't have a PhD. Would have been easy to go down that path. One of the most important moments in my life was going to the 1989 meeting of the Society for Business Ethics. And so I was young, but I realized the room was filled with 325 amazing scholars, but I thought there were too few people out in the world who were actually doing the things that they were talking about from within corporations. And so I realized that's what I really wanted to do, because that's where the void existed. We had lots of lawyers. We had, thankfully, not enough, but a lot of excellent scholars. And what we needed was someone carrying that message from within.
So you've talked a little bit about how you've worked closely with academics. What have you learned, and who have your role models been in that space, and how have you bridged that in your own ethics and compliance practice?
Oh, just in the spirit of you mentioning what skills and the concept of selling business people on the value of ethics. That's one of the greatest things that I've learned. And it's serious and it's difficult. And so when it comes to moral reasoning and really being able to substantiate why among these choices, why this is the right thing to do, and writing codes of ethics, so learning so much about principle-based ethics and helping corporations realize that if they apply virtue ethics to their corporate values, they can accomplish great things. And so, as I said, Pat Werhanes, her book on Adam Smith changed my life, and I've taught at 7 universities, and I've assigned that book in every instance that I've taught. Mike Hoffman, back in the 80s, at the beginning of me trying to discover if it was possible for there to be, and this was prior to the creation of the Ethics Officer Association in 91, 92. But I flew from San Diego to Boston to meet him, to meet Lynn Sharp Payne. And then Tom Donaldson. Tom Donaldson was someone who was one of these amazing scholars, because there were some of the scholars who don't respect the concept of applied business ethics, that they don't think that there should be ethics officers and there should be a hard line between the wall of the study of the subject and the reality of what business people do. But Tom Donaldson was one of the first persons who had this immense amount of respect in the scholar community and an immense amount of respect among the business people, that he provided consulting services to or would give speeches to. And so it was easy. And he's a tall man, so it's easy to look up to him, so.
That's great, and it's wonderful to try to bring those things together. I am wondering if there are other instances in your professional career where you have been compelled to walk away from a position.
Yep. Yep. There have been, instances when there was a particular general counsel of a corporation, and who was violating laws and policies with certain decisions. And in my role, I had no choice but to call the person out on what was happening. And of course, the general counsel is often a very powerful member of executive management. And so that was an instance where, I was notified that if I didn't stand down, and look the other way. So that was unpleasant. And then, and I've spent, many years serving as a consultant. And so there have been times when I've been brought in because there was a crisis, and there was a sense that the CEO or the board that brought me in did it for all the right reasons, even if it was, inspired by a crisis. So not entirely willingly, but they wanted to use this opportunity for something positive. And then, of course, when you're finished meeting with that very high important person, and you begin to work with the members of senior management on a daily basis for what you'll accomplish. And there have been some examples when I've done that and it's worked out beautifully and the organizations are better for it and everything's great. But there are other examples when I was being asked by these junior executives, to falsify information so that it would please the executive and please the Department of Justice, and they just couldn't believe, because they thought I was a hired gun. And obviously I was going to do anything that they asked for money or more money or something like that. And they just couldn't believe that I wouldn't literally do anything that they asked because I was a consultant and that's all I was supposed to do was make them happy. So not fun.
Not fun. Have you seen differences across industries? You've worked in a lot of different industries. Are some industries more inclined to respond to your sales pitch than others?
Well, the more regulated industries, built into it is, an awareness of these external authorities. So I've sometimes done work for businesses that are, maybe retail, and so they are not regulated, and they define whether, beyond financial reports, they define what it means to be successful or not by reputation. And there are people there who don't care about whether they are ethical or not. It's only what the customers think. But I've found with regulated industries, there's already designed into it a fear of external authorities, an awareness that external authorities are a facet of their ability to succeed. So there's more built into the process. Okay, it is a part of our business. That the Office of the Inspector General or the Department of Justice or the Securities and Exchange Commission is a body that we have to care about. So let's do the things that will help them believe that we are operating on the up and up. So I have found it easier to make that case to those regulated companies.
Is the general direction of business ethics and the progress of it, is it going up, or is it plateaued out, or dare I say, or regressed?
No, it's going up. It's going up. I got started before there were fewer than 5 ethics officers, to my knowledge, in the world when I got started in the 80s. And so, today there are some who feel the number has exceeded 100,000 people around the globe who make their living, in ethics and compliance. And so on that front, it's a positive. And then the scholarship, it's just glorious, for the founders of the Society for Business Ethics to imagine 40 years later that it would be such an established field with such a fantastic journal. And so I feel we've made significant progress, not enough, and we're nowhere close to where we need to be. So, it may feel like it'll take generations, but the business world is a better place today than it was when I started because of business ethics.
What are those areas you'd like to see addressed?
Well, I, as you might sense from answers so far, I want there to be a bigger distinction between the role of an ethics officer and the legal department. So it's been striking, the number of times, that I end up dealing with a general counsel who absolutely believes that it's their responsibility stops at the point where you give advice to upper management and then they do whatever they want because that's their job. The reality is that businesses have responsibilities to multiple stakeholders, not just the fact that upper management can literally do anything that it wants. And so I look forward to a day when there is someone working in business ethics in the organization that's not in the legal department, where the organization's strategy about corporate social responsibility or corporate citizenship is connected so that it's in the same office as the person who's working there, and that to make this actually work, I think people have known over the years, I've always suggested that the role should report to the audit committee of the board of directors for the fact that this is the one group in the corporate structure that already is designed to realize that there are responsibilities for the organization beyond simply that quarter's bottom line. And I've just seen too many instances and suffered through myself too many instances when a good ethics officer loses their job because they're doing it well.
Should ethics and compliance officers be held liable for corporate wrongdoing?
Oh, not for corporate wrongdoing. They should be held liable for negligence in their role. So yeah, I think business would be better if there were more ethics officers who walked away from an instance where they were asked to allow criminal misconduct or to occur, and they looked the other way because they've got to bring home a paycheck and they have responsibilities to their family. So if they were held liable for that level of negligence, and we found many instances of ethics officers walking away from their roles, I think there would be a positive change. So yes, I would support that.
Interesting.
I think we have about 1 more minute here.
Maybe we do.
I'm pushing.
You are.
Well, because she's
That's all right. It's just me. I've got a plane. That's okay. It's not till 3 though. I think we're okay. Question. Did you come here to say something that we have not asked you about and that you are wanting to make sure we record for all time?
Only that,
Good question.
I'm thrilled for those moments when the academic world and the practitioner world work together. And that's why I'm so pleased that the Society for Business Ethics has welcomed me as treasurer. And I think 1% or less of ethics and compliance practitioners read or understand the quality of scholarship that exists. And my career and the service that I've delivered to the organizations where I've worked have absolutely been different and better because I keep one foot in that academic community, even if it's nothing more than reading what these brilliant people have written. So the only thing I would like to say is, like Gretchen Winter and like Ed Carr and a few other people, Frank Daly, I have a tremendous amount of respect for and think the future of the field will be at its best if we have more instances of people who have one foot in practitioner and one foot in academia.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to ask you one more question because you and I have talked about this before, and I don't know if it's something that you want to share, and you certainly don't have to. But your story about Countrywide, which you mentioned, is probably one of the most compelling stories that I've ever heard about ethics officers doing their job. Is that something that you are willing to talk about or share? And it doesn't, I mean, it's up to you, right?
Oh, it's actually, it's been published in some instances for those who are interested, because it's a longer story than we have time to tell right now. But it is a moment. I guess, one of the questions that I thought you might ask has to do with disappointments and have there been regrets along the way? And I can sit in front of this camera and easily recollect the 2 or 3 instances when I really did show courage and integrity, and I'm proud of that. But I'm not batting 1,000 on that front. And that was an instance when I should have and literally could have made a difference. Literally could have affected the depth of the global financial crisis because of where I was at a specific moment in time at the largest mortgage company in the world. And early on, the things that I saw that we were doing, and I'm not independently wealthy. I care about paychecks, and I didn't, I could have said something outside of the organization. I did within, and ultimately lost my job because of that. But one of my regrets is anything we can do to strengthen the courage and the ability for good ethics officers to understand the process and what it would mean to reach out to external authorities when they should and how they should in a way where they might survive that experience. And I had an opportunity to be that type of whistleblower. I didn't take it. I thought about it. I looked into it. I was overwhelmed with the downsides, and I didn't make the decisions that today I wish I did.